Wow, good afternoon everybody. Difficult act to follow after the esteemed gentleman before me and Mr. Shah Rukh Khan, but I'll try my best. So I'm going to talk about a topic that's called crowdfunding. The term crowdfunding, the coinage of the term is pretty recent, but if you look at the concept of what crowdfunding is, also please pardon my voice, I have a really bad cold. So the concept of crowdfunding is actually decades old. Crowdfunding is nothing but as simple as, there we go. So crowdfunding is nothing but small contributions of money from a large number of individuals that results in a very big impact. So what has traditionally been happening with crowdfunding is, before the whole advent of internet and the digital space, people or villages, towns, communities, groups of people, whenever they needed any kind of funds to be raised, what they did was, and you might actually, you guys are young, but during our times as well, when we were back in college and school, whenever we used to raise money for charitable organizations, what we used to do was, we were given a form on which we used to go door to door to individuals' houses. I don't know how many of, I know the front row might empathize with me. You guys won't even know about this. But, so we used to go door to door to people's houses, explaining to them what cause is it that we are supporting and asking them for their support in terms of monetary donations. And the fun part about crowdfunding is that no amount is small and no amount is big. It's about how much you're willing to part with and how much you believe in a particular cause. So, once again, the concept of crowdfunding is something that is very, very old. What has happened now, and since the coinage of the term crowdfunding, is the fact that everything has moved digital, like everything else in the world. People are no longer in the need of going door to door or making phone calls to collect contributions of whatever kind. Everything is accessible on our smartphones today. So that is what crowdfunding is all about. So what are the various categories of crowdfunding? Just to step back, crowdfunding as a concept can be applied to pretty much anything. Today there are organizations, there are individuals who are crowdfunding ideas. There are journalists and there are journalist groups that are crowdfunding news. So, and of course the biggest use case of crowdfunding that exists in today's world is around crowdfunding of money, because the social sector as we know it today, while a lot of support can be extended to the social sector in terms of your thoughts, some sort of advocacy, etc., the biggest need of the hour for the social sector is the funds that are required to do the great work that they do, as ISKCON Temple also does. So I'm going to focus my talk a little bit around how does crowdfunding affect effective fundraising. So coming back to the categories of crowdfunding, in a nutshell, crowdfunding can be categorized in these four primary categories. There is loan-based crowdfunding. Now, how does a loan-based crowdfunding platform work? Is something very simple. It works like a microfinancing organization, MFIs. Let's say there is a village in Punjab, where there are a group of women who formed an artisan community and they require a capital to start a particular business venture that they want to undertake. So what they end up doing is, they come to platforms like ours and they list out their cause, saying that this is what we want to do, and like-minded individuals who are socially inclined can lend certain amounts, as little as 100 rupees, can lend the money towards this group of individuals so that they can fulfill their dream of running a successful venture for artisans. The caveat with loan-based crowdfunding is that there is an expectation of the returns. So there is always an entity that is involved that helps the money flow back to the donor once the fulfillment of whatever the objective was is completed. The second kind of crowdfunding is reward-based. Quick show of hands, how many of you all have heard of Kickstarter? Great, enough. So Kickstarter is the best example of reward-based crowdfunding. What is reward-based crowdfunding? I as an entity, let's say I am a watch manufacturer, Pebble watch, it's a very, very popular use case in this. I am a watch manufacturer, however, I don't have the means to manufacture my watch because I don't have the funds. Banks won't give me a loan because I have no credit. And my father has told me, "Tu ja idhar se khud se kuch kar le." So what do I do? So I use a platform like Kickstarter, wherein I list up my product with my prototype, and what I pledge from users like yourselves, like me, all over the world, what I pledge is that if you give me $100 today, in 3 months' time, once I start manufacturing my watch and start delivering it to the market, I will deliver you my first prototype watch. And this is kind of an exclusive only deal where people, let's say they have a limitation of only 1,000 backers or 1,000 donors. So the first 1,000 people that actually back my venture will receive the first watch at a discounted rate, and it's an exclusive deal. So this is how, so the concept is that you give me money today, I reward you in time. And that's what reward-based crowdfunding talks about. The third kind of crowdfunding, and the biggest in the world today, is donation-based. As the word itself, donation, says, it's something that you give with absolutely no expectation of return. The only return is just the feel-good factor that you've done good towards a particular cause or a particular community. And the last kind is equity, which is something that's really, really recent. Still not allowed in India, by the way. RBI and SEBI have deemed it as illegal. But it's very simple. Today, if you want to invest in a startup or in a venture, there are only two ways to do it, right, as of today. There's either something that is publicly listed, which is on the stock exchange, so you buy shares of that company and that's how you become an investor in the company. The second one is private companies raise rounds of money over time, and if you can participate in those rounds, you get to get a stake in that company. However, the biggest problem with these both is that the sums of money that are required is very, very large. If I had a meager savings of say 5,000 rupees, and if I wanted to invest in a few companies that I believe would do very, very well, equity-based crowdfunding is the answer to that, wherein you can use crowdfunding platforms to invest very small amounts of money in certain companies and you get equity or stock in return. So these are some of the sectors that crowdfunding is actually revolutionizing. Education. So how is crowdfunding working really well for education? The greatest use case is, there is a great story of a girl child of a prostitute from a remote area in Mumbai, whose mother decided that my daughter will not have the same fate as myself. And she really encouraged her and fought tooth and nail against the world, against the odds, to educate her and get her formal education up to grade 12. And this girl who had performed well throughout her education got an admission into New York University, NYU Stern. That's how great her candidacy was. And unfortunately, coming from the background that she came from, they had absolutely no funds to even buy a flight ticket to send her to New York, leave aside her tuition, her accommodation, her boarding, etc. So one of the non-profits in Bombay called Kranti, they found out about this case and they decided, why should lack of funds, not give a girl who really deserves a great education, not give her a chance to excel in life and to do well, especially from someone who comes from a tainted background. So the NGO, with the help of a crowdfunding platform, they ended up raising 18 lakh rupees for this girl. And this girl today is in the 3rd year of education. She's going to be graduating soon, and she sends a thank you to everyone who helped her. Second category is health, which everyone has touched upon today, and is a really pressing issue in our country. Crowdfunding is helping not only the underprivileged, but also a lot of privileged individuals like ourselves to help us fund our surgeries, our medical costs, our bills. Quick background around why health is a very good fit for crowdfunding is the fact that India, if you look at traditionally, is a heavily underinsured country. Health insurance today, even PM Modi is heavily trying to promote health insurance, especially for the rural class, because the penetration of health insurance is extremely poor. And even where the penetration does exist, and even if a few of us do have health insurance, the problem lies that our insurance covers us in a best case scenario around 5 lakhs or 10 lakh rupees. But that is also in a best case scenario. If I had to take an average, everyone averages at around 1.5 lakh rupees. So just take a case wherein you've been diagnosed with a serious illness, let's say something that is fatal in nature, maybe a cancer of some sorts, and the hospital that you've been visiting has given you a mandate that your bill is going to go to the tune of 25 lakh rupees. Now how do you even fathom making a payment of 25 lakh rupees towards a cause of this nature? That's where crowdfunding plays a very important role. What crowdfunding enables you to do is list your cause either for yourself or for a loved one. Just for instance, let's take an example of this college. You guys are all peers, colleagues, students, studying together, having fun together, etc. Unfortunately, let's say one of us had to encounter a situation like this, wherein we had contracted a serious illness, and we are in need of treatment, and we are in need of a large quantum of money, which clearly becomes a very difficult amount even for a family to afford. So what's been happening effectively in Bombay is peers and friends are coming up in support of each other, and they are coming and resorting to platforms of crowdfunding to raise money for the other. Just to give you a quick example, there is a gentleman from he works at TCS in Bangalore, and unfortunately, and this is a very recent case, unfortunately he protracted cancer for the third time in his life, and he's only 38 years old. And he comes from a background where he went to IIT, he went to IIM afterwards, and this time around, because he had a very acute kind of cancer, the doctors had told him that the bills in terms of treatment, the therapies, etc. would go up to the tune of 2.5 crore rupees. And all his colleagues from IIT, all his colleagues from IIM, and all his colleagues from TCS came together, started a campaign on behalf of this gentleman, and ended up raising 2.8 crore rupees in a matter of 30 days. And that's what the power of crowdfunding can do for a medical cause. Disaster relief is it's actually a good example to talk about right now. What's happening in Kerala is extremely unfortunate. As of today morning, again there was some news that there have been more deaths, and there are a lot of non-profits who are doing amazing work over there. So platforms like ourselves and our peers, what we enable these non-profit organizations to do is come and list these causes. So there are a lot of organizations as of right now who are raising money for what's happening in Kerala, just to enable those families. I think the numbers are pretty ridiculous. About 200,000 families have been displaced already. So that just to think of somebody going through this, and if we can contribute or make a difference sitting here to their lives over there, that's how crowdfunding helps you. Social sector I've already covered. Finally, it's about startups and inventions, and this is where primarily the reward-based crowdfunding comes into play, wherein a lot of great ideas, India with the whole Make in India movement that's going on right now is really blooming, it's really blossoming. A lot of young individuals have that entrepreneurship spirit, who are coming up with great ideas, coming up with great product ideas, service ideas, etc. However, the only hindrance right now is the outflow of ideas is faster than the inflow of money, the influx of money that is coming into these startups. And even for these individuals, it becomes a very lucrative idea or an option to use a crowdfunding platform. So quick synopsis of how online crowdfunding platform with its innate, the way it functions is really beating offline. Its cost effectiveness, first and foremost, yes, because there is minimal requirement of human capital. Everything is digitally available on the internet, and with amazing plans that our telecom providers are now providing us with, thanks to Mr. Mukesh Ambani, it is very, very easy for everyone to be online. Everyone is always on Facebook, everyone is always on Instagram. So it becomes extremely easy to reach out to a large audience, which comes to point 2. Transparency is something that I think the social sector has lacked, and we believe when we started Ketto 6 years back as well, one of the key problems that we were looking to solve was the genuinity that people felt about giving to causes or to non-profits. Everyone always gives money to a non-profit, but says, मैंने तो अपना कर लिया, अभी वो जो करेगा वो करेगा. Because that there is a lack of faith, there is a disconnect somewhere where you or in the people's mind there is a perception that non-profits are not really doing great work. While I would say there are a few who probably do fall into that category, but the majority of non-profits in India are doing fantastic work. And something that online crowdfunding effectively helps them bring out is the transparency, because everything is in the open. Everything is in the open for everyone to see. All the documentation, all the requirements, paperwork, etc. So it makes it extremely transparent as a process. And finally, engagement. I think it's difficult to read, but point 4 is engagement. With the advent of social media, especially Facebook, WhatsApp, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, etc., it's become very easy now to engage a group of individuals who are like-minded towards a particular cause. Just for an example, and this happens on Facebook a lot, especially around animal welfare. There is a very strong community who genuinely believes very deeply for animals, and Facebook has become an extremely strong medium for people to not only voice their opinions, but also to take a lot of actions around cruelty that's happening to animals somewhere, or if some animal is up for adoption, etc. So what social media is entailing us to do is increase a lot of engagement towards these causes, which earlier was not there, right? I could be wrong about this, but if we had to rewind 20 years back, I don't know how many people were regularly talking about social causes. How many people? Because there were no mediums to converse about this. I don't envision people meeting in a restaurant or in a bar and talking about, आज वो animal adoption पे आया था, कि वो animal के साथ cruelty हुआ था. So everything with social media has increased people's conversations, and increase in conversation only increases awareness. And because people are more aware, the propensity for people to give has increased over the time. Some numbers now. So crowdfunding worldwide in 2017 had raised $16.2 billion. And it is projected that by 2019, it is going to raise $34 billion worldwide. And 60% of the projections that are made are towards healthcare, are towards medical causes. So it just goes to show that what the power of a digital medium and a platform like a crowdfunding platform, the impact that it can drive and the impact that it can create. In Asia itself, crowdfunding has grown 320% in the last 2 years, wherein I think about last year in Asia $3.3 billion were raised. And in a nutshell, this is what the global crowdfunding market looks like. As always, North America and the Americas are always ahead of the curve. That this is something that had begun in North America about 11 years back and is now slowly flowing east, where Asia, as you can see, has already overtaken Europe. Because if you think about causes in the world, most of the giving activities today are happening around either Africa or the Indian subcontinent, because this is where all the biggest individuals, the HNIs, the biggest institutions around the world, just for example, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, etc., even their endowment fund everything is flowing in that direction. And with our country, with India getting digitally empowered now, where more and more individuals are coming online, more and more individuals, their spending power is increasing. That's where the whole flow of how the crowdfunding market is now moving towards us is happening. So quickly talking about what crowdfunding platforms help an individual, a non-profit, or anyone, or hospital, anyone who's raising money, is obviously first, great use of technology, dedicated placement online where anytime anyone who wants to see what's happening, what's not happening, transparency, right, is available, and a bunch of other values as I mentioned about social media, etc. So just quickly, there are primarily three stakeholders when it comes to online crowdfunding in India right now. First and foremost are the non-profits. Now the biggest value add for non-profits in crowdfunding, what crowdfunding has brought, is the cost of fundraising. Traditionally, all non-profits in India used to raise money only via offline mediums. And when I say offline mediums, it's either door-to-door sales or it's telecalling. I'm sure a lot of people still receive phone calls, but inherently the biggest problem with this kind of fundraising is the fact that it is extremely expensive, and in certain cases it's as high as up to 50% for the door-to-door or the telecalling agencies. So just to put things in perspective, every time there's someone who comes to your house or to your office to ask for a donation, if you donate 100 rupees towards that cause, 50 rupees is actually the cost that is borne by the non-profit to raise that 100 rupees. So only half the money goes to the non-profit. So the biggest advantage that technology has brought to this whole space is to reduce that cost from 50% to 5%, which I think is a great win, because non-profits are being able to bestow or endow more of their funds towards the causes that actually require the attention, as opposed to devoting funds towards the source of how to raise that money. Also, secondly, what non-profits are really benefiting is the simplicity of creating this process of raising money now. Again, traditionally, for some reason, NGOs have always been run as a very primitive organization. They have not been corporatized as much as other organizations or the private sector in India has. And how is this helping them is kind of streamlining their entire process, creating easy to understand dashboards so that they can effectively focus on what they do best, is what is servicing the causes. Another great benefactor of crowdfunding are corporate entities today. As we all know, there is a compulsory 2% CSR rule that has been applied in India for all corporate entities who are doing a turnover of more than 1,000 crores or profit over an X amount. So what crowdfunding is effectively helping them do is spend some of their CSR money, in turn trying to create a great goodwill, create a great employee engagement kind of an activity within the organization itself, because people perceive the corporate to be doing great work. So there's a lot of goodwill that has been generated around these corporates. And finally, for individuals, and this is the biggest use case today for crowdfunding in the world, where people are raising money for themselves, or people are trying to help people via crowdfunding and raising money for them. What has effectively started happening is, if you again go back in time, if you had a friend or if you had a family member who was in dire needs of funds for any cause, be it education, be it because they want to start a business, be it medical treatment, etc. The only way at that point of time you could have helped them was parting with some of your own funds to help them achieve their goals or their targets. However, nowadays there is a shift in momentum of how people are helping each other, and the example I cited earlier about how students in college today are helping each other through their tough times. Another great example is there is a Baha competition that most of the colleges have, where they have to build a race car and compete in the competition. And most of these colleges don't get enough funds. Sorry, most of the student bodies don't get enough funds from their colleges, and that's where they've been again adopting 2 crowdfunding platforms to raise money so that they can effectively compete in these organizations. I have been told that I'm running out of time, so I'm just going to skim through these slides. Just a synopsis of what the healthcare sector in India looks like. The deficit today of underprivileged patients that are in requirement of funds but don't get enough funds, either to the government or to the other entities, is 35,000 crore rupees. 35,000 crores. That's a huge amount, and I think I'll leave you all to just dwell on this. And I think the only way we can move forward is if all of us come together, try and help these causes, and try and make a difference to the country. Thank you.